everyone. I'm Lauren Van Hamert from Beltline to Broadway. I'm here with the amazingly talented Christopher Gurr. If and we're going to talk about this fantastic production of Fun Home. And I'm going to say right off the top, if you haven't got your tickets, you got to get tickets to this fabulous show because it's just so good. But welcome, Christopher. I'm happy. I'm happy we get to chat.
I know. Thanks for having me, Lauren. I really appreciate it.
Well, and it's funny. Okay, so I've been doing this in this area a long time. If you haven't figured it out yet, guys, two ways you know that I love a show is one, I write about it and I say how good it is, but then I also want to talk about it, which is what happened with Fun Home. I saw it and I was like, oh, I have to talk about this show. So I'm so grateful you're here to talk about it with me. And if you're watching and you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them. But Christopher, let's start about talking about this show. You played Bruce, the dad, in the Theater Raleigh production of Fun Home. Your performance is so brilliant. But for people who don't know what the show is about, can you give us a brief synopsis?
I can try. So this is all based on real people, the Bechdel family. Alison Bechdel is the author of a graphic novel. She's actually a cartoonist, and she wrote a fairly famous graphic novel called Fun Home, and that's what this musical is based on. And Alison Bechdel is basically in this graphic novel is writing about her growing up period from when she was a little girl, about around 9 probably, up through college. And then you also experience her in her present then, which I think is about mid-40s, looking back. So it's a memory piece. And it was, I think, the Tony winner in 2015. So it did fairly well. It's a strongly written and performed piece. So in the play, you meet Alison, you meet her father and mother and 2 brothers. And the reason it's called Fun Home is that is short for funeral home, because as a family business, Bruce took over his father's business, which is a funeral home in this small town in Pennsylvania. So in that it's a memory piece, there's not a plot that goes chronologically through time. She remembers like, oh, this is from when I was a little girl. Oh, this is from when I was in college. Oh, little girl again. Oh, college again. So it kind of jumps around in terms of its chronology.
I love that you said that because it's definitely not a linear piece. And I think, you and I were talking off camera before we went on. There was another production in this area a few years ago that not just me, but several people I've spoken to found a little bit confusing because of the way it was told. And I think with this piece, the way it's directed, the scenery design makes all of these jumps in time just so clear. Tim Seib did such a good job on this piece.
Tim's a remarkable director. Yeah, and I think and the space I think is a good space for this. It's a very long space. And for some reason I think that helps the telling of this story. I really love performing on this stage a lot. And if you're interested in this space in this long form, go now, because they're doing construction in that theater and they're about to cut it in half and make 2 spaces. So we're using the whole width of it, which is, I think, really cool. Yeah, but I think Tim did a beautiful job with the staging of this.
It is a beautiful piece. Now I want to talk about, for me, in dissecting this piece and thinking about this piece, so my process as a theater critic is I'll go see a show and then I'll think about it, usually for a day or 2 afterwards, to really dissect it and analyze it. For me, although this is definitely Alison's story, the key to this whole piece, either working or not working, is the character Bruce, is the dad. Without giving too many spoilers away, he does some terrible things. You don't
Yep.
have to like him. You certainly don't have to condone any of his actions. But for me, I think you have to have an understanding of him. You can't just hate him. You have
No.
to have some sort of understanding of him or insight so that you really can appreciate Allison's evolution. That's how I see the show. So
Yeah.
how do you see this character of Bruce? For me, he's the knockdown domino from which everything else happens in this
Well,
play.
yeah, that's a really great way of putting it, because the word catalyst comes to mind. It's definitely Allison's story. She's the subject of the story as well as the investigator of the story. But she's the subject of the story. But Bruce is the catalyst. He's the chemical reaction. And if I were to try to say, like, what's Allison in pursuit of, I think she's in pursuit of understanding her relationship with her father, understanding her past interactions with her father. So it is certainly her story, and she is both literally and figuratively at the center of this production. She actually sits at a drawing table at the center of this production to watch the whole thing. But Bruce, the other family members as well, but she seems obsessed, seems a harsh word, but she's very, very interested in her relationship with her father. This is not spoiling anything, because actually Allison puts out in the first 5 minutes of the play, she says, here's the deal, and this is how it's going to end. So it's not a what happens, it's a how does it happen. So the two things that they have in common, she and her father, is they're both gay. And so I think that's a tie. That's like the golden thread that ties them together in a way that doesn't tie her to her other family members. So yeah, I would agree. Bruce is an important catalyst. And I think it's back to one of your other points. It was important to me not to make him a monster, because she would jettison his memory faster if that's all he was a monster. He has to be complicated enough that she's still working on, at the age of 43, 44, whatever she is, that she's still digging through those memories. It has to be complicated enough to dig through. If the man's just a monster, it's pretty easy to have a couple of therapy sessions and take care of that.
And you're done. Exactly. And that's how I felt like in the previous production I had seen. He was just portrayed as a monster and you didn't care. You were like, okay, Allison, go get some help. You'll be fine. And by the time you find out what happens to him, you're just like, oh, thank God. And with your portrayal, you really felt like, oh, I get it. I kind of I don't like him. I'm not condoning what he does, but I get it. And so that's what I thought was so brilliant about your portrayal.
Thank you. There were two very smart people in my head, not counting Tim, who was in the room with me, but two memories in my head. One, Lisa Crone, who wrote the play, the book part of this, right? And I've been fortunate enough to be in a couple of rooms with her. But in the preface to the script of this a piece, she warns people doing production. She says, now, this is not chronological. Do not try to make it add up to the ending. You need to treat each episode as an individual thing. So if it was an episode where he's being sweet and gentle with his children, then I go out on stage to play those 3 minutes and to be the best dad in the world. If it's an episode where he loses his temper, I go out there and that's the episode that I play. If it's one where he's struggling, so I just go out there to play the individual moment, not to try to do this big arc. The other really smart person I had in my head was Mike Nichols, who I've also been lucky enough to work with. And one of Mike's real 101 kind of notes to us always, even on Spamalot, one of the most ridiculous things on the planet. But when he came out and would give notes, one of the things he said was, we need that audience to constantly be sitting there and nodding and going, yes, people are like that. And if you can get them to be just sitting there having that thought all night long, it's great. So I wanted people to look at Bruce and go, yeah, people are like that. People are complicated. Yeah.
Absolutely. And families are complicated. And the other thing that I thought your performance, again, as that catalyst, the mom figure in this, because your performance was so telling her performance. I mean, it's funny, the person I went with, my colleague Kim and I saw the same production a few years ago, and Kim said to me afterwards, she's like, I don't really even remember the mom in the other production. Here, again, because you're that catalyst to everything that's happening, the mom's arc became that much more just
And
just palpable.
yeah, and it's devastating. It's her portrayal is devastating. The way it's written is devastating. It's devastating. Yeah, yeah. Sarah Smith,
And
she's
she
amazing.
does, and she does such a marvelous job, as does the whole cast in this. It's so believable that you guys are a family. Hard to believe that you only were together a few weeks prior to going on stage.
Well, that's that's we can give credit to the casting process, which they say is like 95% of your job as a director. But Tim and Lauren, other Lauren, not you, other Lauren, put together a remarkable group. I mean, we just fell in within moments. We just kind of fell in together. It was really great.
Very beautiful. And it is a testament to Lauren Kennedy Brady. She's the producing artistic director at Theatre Raleigh, and she's done some amazing productions. And I feel like with Theatre Raleigh's choice of season, she just keeps up in the game, which I'm just so thrilled to see. A few years ago, I had one of our other local managing artistic directors, Timothy Locklear, he compiled a list of important LGBTQ works in American theater. Fun Home was, of course, on his list of musicals, as was Kinky Boots, which you did on Broadway. It is so interesting to me because when Fun Home opened in 2015, it was a terrible year for LGBTQ human rights, for anti-LGBTQ legislation was at an all-time high in so many states. And 2021, I just read an article, could be worse than 2015. They actually compared it to 2015.
Oh, really?
So I'm curious, what is the significance of doing this show now, particularly in a state which has passed some really horrendous anti-LGBTQ legislation historically? You're not from here, but this is not has not always been an LGBTQ friendly state.
Yeah.
Does it play differently now than it did maybe in 2015 when it first opened? Does its significance feel different post-Trump?
Everything feels different post-Trump, just because the polarization and the tribalism has just become more ingrained in all of us on all sides. Everyone is hunkered down harder. Everyone. I don't think there's an exception to that. So whereas, legislatively, we may be in very similar positions in 15 and 21, I know it feels different to me now, to even go out on stage and wonder who's out there in the dark. That thought, which I think is in every actor's brain, is different. It's slightly different now. And, and it's a real cocktail in my brain, because it's like, I don't want to go out there and perform to a bubble. I don't want to go out there and perform only to people who think and feel like me. That would seem to be, the old term, preaching to the choir. And there's some value in preaching to the choir because it makes the choir feel good. But, I hope that a mix of people are coming. I trust that a mix of people are coming. It's very interesting, though, because now with COVID, to even walk into the room, you have to make some health decisions that have been highly politicized. So, I kind of think that probably I am performing to a bit of a bubble crowd down here. I hope not. I really hope not, but I might be. There's no way for me to know. In terms of its significance politically, and probably even as I received it, I have a long history with this piece. In 2010, I was part of one of the very first readings of this piece, like just around a table reading for the writers to hear it. And at that point, there was a 3-person ensemble. You know how Melvin Gray's part, he's a utility track. He plays several different people beautifully. Well, back then in 2010, there were 3 people doing that, playing different people. At the end of that week, they decided there is no ensemble in Fun Home, which is good. So I've been thinking about this piece for a long time. And the thing that has been true for me all of this time, which I think is its secret weapon, politically speaking, is that it is more, I think, a family drama than a sexual politics drama. You know, it really is. Yes, parents and children are like that. Yes, fathers and daughters are like that. Yes, husbands and wives can be like that. You know, it's back to the Mike Nichols things. Yes, people are like that. And if we can get people to sit in front of any piece of art, and even if they don't see themselves specifically up there, but for them to be able to go, yep, people are like that. It's like what they say about, you know, to change someone's political mind, the most important thing is for them to know personally an individual who is a part of the group that they would usually vilify, you know, for them to personally know that person. And, you know, maybe coming to see Fun Home is an opportunity for them to kind of practice that. I had a teacher who once said theater is a great gymnasium for empathy. You know, we go to the theater to practice our empathy, to work on our empathy muscles. So, you know, that would be my hope. My hope, of course, is that, you know, someone with some left tendencies has dragged their wife or husband or cousin or brother with some right tendencies to the theater, and that maybe they enjoyed it and it wasn't scary. That's a hope of mine.
Well, and I think it makes it, any piece of theater makes it accessible. And I always think about Kinky Boots. When you change your what is it? When you change your heart, you change mind, something like that. Kinky Boots just says it so beautifully. I love that show too. Um, you mentioned COVID, and it's hard not to talk about the theater right now without talking about COVID. But Theater Raleigh has done such a fantastic job putting COVID protocols in place,
Oh yeah.
really keeping audiences safe. I have felt very safe as an audience member going to Theater Raleigh. I don't feel like I'm taking my health in jeopardy. And about keeping the actors safe. I know when originally we were going to do this in person, there was going to be a COVID
Compliance officer.
coordinator from
Yeah,
Theater.
yeah,
Yeah. So talk to me about the post-COVID measures that Theater Raleigh and a lot of professional theaters, most professional theaters at this point, have taken and put in place to keep performers safe.
Yeah, all aspects of the industry have taken it on, and in terms of theater and the unions that rule theater versus the unions that rule TV and movies, because that was my first experience, was being on a TV set or a movie set with COVID. That happened earlier. But to use Theater Raleigh as an example, it's pretty basic. They were able to get together a fully vaccinated cast and crew, which helps things a lot. That everyone, you know, volunteered that information as they were putting together this group of collaborators. And so that, according to the Actors Equity Union, who represents me as an actor, and SDC, which represents Tim as a director, they have protocols. And so they say, is everyone in your company vaccinated? And if the answer to that is yes, you go into this column and you follow these rules, such as in the rehearsal space, we can be unmasked together because we know what our cohort is. But we walk even into the green room outside the rehearsal space, it's masks on because other people could be in that space. We've been doing weekly testing. As a matter of fact, but just before I signed on with you, I had a swab up my nose, you know, and I send that information into our COVID compliance officer, Allison. So everyone will do that tonight before we come to the theater, so that even as you walk into the theater after the day's off, we all know where we stand. My partner right now is in New York doing a reading, and he literally just called me and said, we all had to leave the rehearsal hall because a positive test came up for one person, and they have protocols in place. Everyone leaves, everyone goes and gets a rapid test. They'll make phone calls tonight. They may start rehearsal tomorrow. They may start rehearsal the next day, but I feel very well taken care of. I have on the TV sets I've been on and the movie sets I've been on, and now this is my first theater experience, and it's been quite good. I feel very well taken care of.
And you mentioned TV and film, so let's go there for a second. People may have seen you on Blacklist. Mm-hmm. My mother loves that show. See, you've just done all of our favorites, from Cats to Blacklist. You've got it covered.
Right.
But do you have a favorite medium? Because you've done so much theater on and behind the scenes. You've done a lot of directing, and then you've done the TV and film work. So do you have a favorite medium?
Well, I mean, TV and film has come to me later in life. So I'm still actually figuring out what my relationship to that is, and trying to find the real joy in that work, because I'm a theater baby. I grew up as a kid doing theater. This was the waters I was born into and that I've always lived in. So I love camera work. Camera work is a bit more of a technical puzzle. But I enjoy that very much. It actually kind of scratches my director brain a little bit, because it's so technical. You know, you have to be thinking very specifically. There's that camera, there's that light, there's that mic, you know, but I enjoy that a lot. I mean, as with all things, I like a good crop rotation. I think the best possible year is the year when you do like a little bit of teaching, a little bit of acting on camera, a little bit of acting on stage, and a little bit of directing. You know, that's the perfect year. You don't get those often, but that's the dream. Yeah.
How does your work, having been a director, and your directing resume is very impressive as well, how does that inform how you approach your acting? You said in the TV world, you're kind of scratching that directing bug, but how does it inform how you approach a piece like Fun Home?
Probably in the biggest way it does is that I think I have a very clear, I should go back and say, I strive to have a very clear understanding of my character's function in the larger piece, and to make sure that that is what I am serving, not my own agenda about the character or ego about my life as a performer, but to really, like, at the beginning of every scene, to go, what's the point of this scene? The point of this scene is to get Allison to this next place she has to be. The point of the scene is not to, you know, sell you Bruce or sell you Christopher Gurr. The point of the scene is to get the mom into her song. The point of the scene is to get Allison to be so squirmy with her new girlfriend. The point of this, you know, so that's my director brain in service of my work as an actor. That's probably the most important way. Yeah.
And I feel like you just gave a master class to all young actors, because I think so many young actors coming out of school, they are not, I have two young people living in my house, so I can speak to those young people, but they are a very self-centered generation. and so I feel like what you're speaking to just speaks so well to theater and theater as an art form. I know you've done a lot of teaching. There are some young people in this production of Fun Home. They are brilliant as well. Yes. But what would your advice to young people pursuing this as a craft be, particularly after the year that was, when everything was shut down?
Well, well, this may not be popular, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. You know, most training programs out there are in the business of training you to join a system that already exists, right? And that makes sense. You know, when my father was a college professor, he was a history professor. And when I decided to go off to theater school, which he totally supported and had since I was a little kid, but I went off to a conservatory. It was not a liberal arts school at all. I went to Webster University in St. Louis. And he said, oh, it's a Votech school for theater, meaning you're having job training. This is not a liberal arts education. And he was right. It was job training. It was also arts training, but it was job training. They were training me specifically to be employed as an actor, which is not an easy proposition. So if you keep that in mind, that a metric that has always been used to assess training programs is how many of their graduates are working. And even better, how many of their graduates are working in high profile jobs. I wish that training programs took more pride in their artists to go out into other parts of the country and do the good work, not in New York and not in LA. But unfortunately, the better selling points to get students into a program are success in LA and success on Broadway. That is all preamble to the next thing I'll say, which is watch carefully, kids and parents of kids. Watch the programs who are agile enough to be taking into consideration the inevitable changes that are coming down the pike for your art form, particularly your art form as an employment possibility. That's a fairly complicated statement, but it's true. I am concerned with the training programs that are basically just running out the clock and thinking that everything is going to come back exactly as it was, and that they will continue to train young artists as if that were true. I personally not only think it is not true that we will go back to exactly the way we were, I do not wish that we go back to the way we were before. There's a lot of stuff that needs bettering in my field. So if I were advising a young person, and I coach a lot of young people on their auditions for colleges, I would really be saying, if you could find a program that in conversation with you said, here's what we're excited to do. We are excited to train you to be an artist who can go out and make the new world, as opposed to, we are excited to train you to book a show on Broadway. That would be the difference for me.
Maya said, amen. Jeff's running out the clock. Thank you for that perspective. I thank you, Maya and Jeff, for weighing in. I think it's so true, because I think as artists, we have our eye on that finished product, the end goal of being on Broadway, being in Los Angeles, being in Hollywood. And you lose sight of the process. You lose sight of the art form. So I love that you said that.
And it's I like a training program, and I like classes and anything that makes you continue to be able to access your joy in the making of art, because if you have joy in the making of art, you will be able to survive all the hardships, and there will be plenty in your hopefully long life as an artist. And that's what I'm rooting for with young artists. Like when I'm working with these young artists that I'm working with in Fun Home, the main thing I hope for them is that they have a long life in the arts. My main hope is not that they get on Broadway, frankly. It would be useful to them to have that magic word on their resume, but as an artist, it will not be the end all be all. And it may not be their best art they ever make in their life. I just want them to have a good, long life as themselves, not them imitating anyone. But, authenticity and longevity are the main things that I'm like, please go be authentic and do it a long time, and that'll be good.
And like I said, I feel like I'm sitting in master class. I love this. I think everybody not only is going to run to see Fun Home, but everybody's going to want you to coach them after this interview as well.
That's actually weirdly, that has turned out to be my favorite thing that I do. You said, what do I like? Do I like theater or on camera? Actually, my very favorite thing that I do is coaching. It really is. I love it.
And we should say you were coaching before coaching was trendy, before COVID.
Everybody's coaching now. Like literally everyone with a webcam is coaching out, which is fine. Everybody will find their right place. It'll be fine.
You speak about the theaters around the country versus Broadway, and I love Broadway. So, I can't wait to go back in October, and I'm seeing every show I can manage to squeeze in and 6 days.
Yeah.
Um, but I also have such a deep appreciation for regional houses like Theater Raleigh, like North Carolina Theater, so many local theaters, not just here but all over the country, that are just doing such amazing work. You have toured this country on national tours. You've also worked regionally in a lot of regional houses. I saw you worked at in Indiana, where I went to
Mhm.
school.
Yep. Oh,
Um, talk about why, and you're preaching to the choir, because I see Jeff and Maya, and I know that they're just as much in love with the local theater,
mhm.
local arts community as I am. But talk about the importance of those regional theaters in the ecosystem of theater in this country. Why should we be supporting local theater, particularly post COVID? I mean, we don't have Oprah making infomercials for our local theaters. She's
Yeah,
just doing that
for Broadway. Yeah.
for Broadway. So on this platform, to be an infomercial for the local theaters.
A couple of different things in terms of its not contribution. It is the bedrock of the ecosystem of theater in America, and Broadway couldn't exist without it. Certainly not now. One thing is that local art will speak to local experience always better, always, as opposed to something that gets shipped in. The local mirror will tell a truer picture of the local story, and that's a critical thing about art, right? The other is worldview and perspective. You just to have a monocultural perspective on the world, and that monoculture exists, in a 10 block radius in Manhattan. That's a terrible thing. And I live in New York. That would be a terrible thing. We need viewpoints from all over. Also, New York is not a safe space. A safe space to make art will make better art. And sometimes the regions, because they're not under the glare of national press, or actually more importantly, not under the financial pressures of making something work in one of the 41 houses on Broadway. It's incubator makes it sound like it's a junior, like a farm league, but it's not. It's critical. It is the place where new art can happen, in an authentic way and over a period of time. So I think it's super critical. I'm a regional theater baby. I did my first 2 decades of work were solely in the regions. I didn't move to New York until I was 45, and I went kicking and screaming. I was like, I took my time getting there. So I'm a big proponent of work in the regions. As a matter of fact, I was excited, the weird positive things that have come out of COVID. And when 50% of my friends, all artists mostly, left New York, and then 50% of them several months later made noises about staying wherever they were, and they went all over the country, usually back to some version of home. I got really excited because I thought what we were experiencing was an organic restructuring that happened during the WPA period, where artists went out through the country. Like, we spread out. We didn't all hunker down on one island in New York and one sunny spot in Los Angeles, but it spread out. And again, art being made locally for locals by locals, or even hybrids like Fun Home is. We've got 3 visiting artists in town for this, but that's not even the majority of this cast. And I think it makes for better work, honestly.
Well, and the work is so strong, and I think looking at Fun Home through the lens of what's happening in the state of North Carolina just makes it richer. It just makes it a richer experience.
Yeah.
We got to talk about cats, because my kids are obsessed. So we'll just talk about cats for a second. Uh, while Fun Home was running on Broadway in 2016, right before it closed, you were starring in another show as my favorite theater cat.
Oh,
Gus and
yeah.
Christopher Jones.
Yep.
And that was actually your second time playing that theater. I love this kind of full circle moment
Yeah.
for you. So talk about the full circle moment that was coming back to that theater,
Well,
the
that's an
Neil
amazing concept.
Simon.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the Neil Simon on 52nd Street, and it's where I made my Broadway debut, which was in a play, not a musical. And it was All the Way, starring Bryan Cranston, which is about LBJ and his administration, and it's a play that ends with the signing of the Voting Rights Act. In any case, I played in that production Senator Strom Thurmond, which nearly killed my mother, but I did. I played Strom Thurmond. So the next time I showed up on that stage, I was playing a cat. I was playing two cats, actually. Gus, the old theater cat, and Christopher Jones, the big gustatorial cat. Yeah, that's my Neil Simon story.
And talk to me. We were kind of joking before about liking cats, and I think cats is a gateway for getting kids to like cats. I saw it in my house. It's or getting kids to like theater. That is what cats is for sure. At least it was for my children, and for a lot of kids, I think. Talk to me about being part of that legacy that
Uh,
is cats.
it was amazing. When Cats first opened in the West End, my mom and Aunt Carol went over and saw it, and I got the album of the London production, and I loved it. I played it all the time, all the time, all the time. This is well before that PBS, so I couldn't see it. I could only do what I did for years, which is sit in my bedroom floor with albums, mind you, and imagine what was going on. So I fell in love with it, and to be totally honest, I fell in love with Gus. He was my guy, even when I was, I guess I was probably 12 at that point, but Gus was my guy. And I still contend, and I told Tara Rubin this, who cast Cats, that my audition for Gus on Broadway was exactly what I used to do in my bedroom when I was 12 years old. It was the exact same performance, but I booked it. And it was a thrill. I mean, not only doing an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, but going down to the basement of the Neil Simon Theater because he needs to rewrite something, and I stand at the piano singing while he's playing. That's just a dream, right? Right. Trevor Nunn is directing it. When I was in college, when we were studying Shakespeare, we read all about Trevor Nunn, and now I'm having lunch with him and fighting with him over a point of poetry in T.S. Eliot. It was just the most amazing. And Andy Blankenbuehler, of course, I'm not a dancer, and Andy Blankenbuehler put up with me beautifully, but to be in a room to watch that genius work, it was exceptional. And I was the old man of that cast by a long shot. I turned 50 during that production, and most of those dancers and actors were probably from their early, I think we had an 18-year-old was our youngest, and then I think it went into people's early 30s. But I loved it. I loved being a part of that. I loved performing it every single night. Yeah, it was great.
You say you're not a dancer, but you were in another show that Casey Nicola directed and choreographed, right? So, and
Oh yeah.
his choreography is crazy. When I saw The Prom, I was like, "This is like dance on steroids."
Yeah.
He
I did two Casey shows called Spamalot. Casey choreographed Spamalot, and I did the first after that. But I also did Tuck Everlasting. That was the last thing I did for him on Broadway. Yeah, nuts.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Amazing, amazing director and genius. He's done so much for shows.
Oh.
You wrote on your blog, I guess relatively recently, it must be after COVID hit, after everything shut down. I'm having trouble. I'm having a troubled relationship with my work of late. I know I'm not alone in that, but it doesn't make it any better. In fact, it makes it worse. How has COVID affected you as an artist, and what has it taught you about yourself, and your work as a theater member, as an artist?
Yeah. I am sure that when I wrote that it wasn't just COVID. It was the double twine rope of COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement reigniting. It was those two things. That when you read that quote to me, that's what my heart is saying, is that it was the two, and probably it was actually more the Black Lives Matter than the COVID, to be totally honest. COVID is a virus. I can't personalize COVID. I can personalize my friends, the people who I love, who I hadn't acknowledged the amount of pain they had to go through on the daily, right? I mean, I would sit in these Zoom meetings and none of the stories ever surprised me. None of the things that ever happened to them ever surprised me. I mean, I grew up in South Georgia. It's hard to surprise me on this topic. But what surprised me and shamed me was that I had told myself that my friends, my Black friends specifically, who were thriving in the business, had figured out how to process it and deal with it, and I was wrong. And that was the big pop that I took to the gut, and I'm still massively processing. Absolutely, it's been amazing. It's nothing like a good knock upside the head to make you see everything different. And now, like, I get auditions and I read them differently. I go like, what's the humor here, and what is it based on? And and who's the storyteller and whose story is it? And I'm having to make some hard decisions about like roles that I have already played in my career that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole now. And that's good news. There's a little bit of sad attached to it, a little bit of mourning, but not much, because this is good news that the lights are on brighter and I know better now. That's good. Now, in terms of what COVID taught me, I mean, a pause that long leaves you a lot of thinking time. And that's the last damn thing I needed, was more thinking time, because I overthink things anyway. But, balance, it probably taught me more about balance. It probably taught me more about, the need for home to be the safe place and not work to be the safe place. It taught me more about I already knew this, but now I know it even more, how much time in the woods really means to me, time in nature. It's that enforced break though. And, when for the first 3 months of that enforced break, I really thought, oh, I'll never act again. I'll never have the opportunity to act again. I need to ready myself for that. And that's not a bad process to have to go through, even if it's not true. That's a good challenging splash of cold water in the face when you get a little comfy and complacent. I've been very, very fortunate in my life and my career, and it's good to be brought up short every once in a while.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to put up the banner for Theater Raleigh. I want everybody to see this production. If you saw another production a few years ago in this area of Fun Home and did not love it, it's the same show, but it's not. This is so well done. And I do feel like in this area, when we look back, there's certain productions you look back on, I think, in any region, and you say that was a really significant production in this area. This is one of those shows. This is going to be one of those shows we're talking about for years to come. So I want everybody to see it. But what do you hope people get out of seeing this production of Fun Home, Christopher?
Well, that's hard to. I have an answer to your question. It's hard for me to wish what the individual response is to it, because the individual response, if we're doing our job, will be utterly individualistic to each person who comes in, right? But my umbrella wish is that you find out that we're back in terms of, we are figuring out how to make a live collaborative art. And by collaborative, I mean with each other and with you, a live audience. We're figuring it out. So it's okay to come into the water with us, figure it out with us, because we're going to have to know how to live with this, not to wait for it to be over. And I think that at least the experience that I'm having right now in that building every night is giving me a lot of hope. And kind of refilling my tank for the inevitable challenges that are coming in front of us.
Well, it is a gorgeous production. Get your tickets. You have a few more chances to see it. It runs tonight through Sunday. and I just cannot wait. I was hoping to come back to Theater Raleigh. I don't usually see shows a second time. I was actually hoping to come back to Theater Raleigh to see this one tonight, but I hope to get there this weekend because it's just an extraordinary production. So everybody, get your tickets. You have to see Christopher's performance. It is a master class. And I will put, when I repost this later, if you joined us late, this will live on Facebook. It'll be on our website as well. And I will put links to Christopher's website as well, because I know you're all going to want to get him as a coach. I feel like you've given us so much nuggets of wisdom. So thank you for that.
Oh,
And thank you all for tuning in. It's been a minute since I did one of these live chats. So this is exciting. And I said to Christopher, my kids are obsessed with cats. I'm pretty sure if I find the picture of my son with Christopher, I will post it later, because I'm pretty sure I have a photo of you guys from that stage door. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. Enjoy the rest of your time in Raleigh. Have you had good barbecue while you're here? Do you eat barbecue?
Lord, I'm from South Georgia. Of course I eat barbecue. But I have not yet. That's on my list. But I gotta say, I've been hitting the Krispy Kremes hard since I've been here. So that's
all right. Krispy Kreme is good. Krispy Kreme is good. But I'm sure Lauren will hook you up with some good places to eat before you leave. And thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren Kennedy Brady, for putting this together for us and making this happen. And just everybody see this amazing show. Thank you, Christopher, and safe travels back to New York.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone. Oh.